What you guys got another computer build for 2019. This is a small tiny Mini-ITX AMD build which we're going to be doing here. We're using the SilverStone Sugo series SG13, which is a really small form factor case, which is pretty cheap to buy, but an awesome small form factor if you want something that's portable. We've also got a cooler in here. I had to swap that out because it was the wrong type, and I swapped it out for a Noctua, as you'll see a little bit later on. We're using the B450 Aorus Pro Wi-Fi as well, and this board will fit nicely into the SilverStone Sugo series SG13. Now, also gone with a intake fan at the front, which is 120mm. That's as big as it gets, and also the SF600 Corsair, which will fit lovely into this SilverStone case. Now, this is a small form factor power supply, 600 watts platinum, and that's what we're going to be putting in. We've got some other bits here which you'll see once we start the build. So let's get the board prepped, and this is the Aorus B450, and it's got the Wi-Fi on here as well. It's designed for AM4 processors, and this is what I chose for my build. Now, you can choose whatever you like here. You can put in whatever AMD processor you want in your build. I'm going to be putting the Ryzen 5 2400G, but I'll probably swap that out for a 2700X at some point. But this is what you get, a really tiny board here. It's so small, but I think these boards are so awesome. Now, inside here you're going to get your IO shield, which is what you're going to need for the board, and also you're going to get your user manual and your disk for all your drivers. Now, I advise you to get those off the website for this board, because you're going to get the latest drivers for that board, okay? Because sometimes they create a lot of these boards in masses and they lie around for a while and they get outdated. You got your SATA cable here, which you can use for your drives, and also I think these are the M.2 screws. I'm not too sure. I have to look at the manual. And you got your Wi-Fi antenna as well. So you get the Wi-Fi, and you got your Go Fast sticker on there, and a bunch of other user manuals and warranties and stuff like that. So I'm going to put this to one side and get the board out of its anti-static bag and go ahead and start to prep the board. Now, AMD have released these AM4 boards, which I think is great, because these have been really successful for people that want to create very small form factors, and this can be a streaming rig or home theater PC, or some sort of gaming PC that you may want to take to LAN parties and stuff like that. So you can see here, this is the actual board itself, very small indeed, and it's not going to be packed with loads and loads of features, but there's enough on here to get by. And I do love that brush aluminium look. Motherboard heat spreaders or heat sinks here, these will cool down the components on the board, and these are essential to keep components running nice and cool, and they've done a really good job on this board. I do like the look of it. It's got a matte black finish here. You've got your CPU 8-pin connector up the top here, and this will be enough. You've got your fan header there, and there's another fan header on here, so it's not packed with loads of fan headers and loads of other features. You've got your audio on the board and Wi-Fi, and of course your M.2 slot is underneath that other heat spreader there. So you can see here, this is the back where your IO shield goes, and you've got all your USB ports, audio and stuff like that. There is your back plate on the back there. Now, the board comes with a back plate, and also the heatsink that I'm going to be using does come with its own back plate as well, so that's pretty good. So what the important part here is to get the right cooler for your ITX AMD4 or your ITX Intel, and I went with this one here, NHL9A AM4. This is brand new from Noctua, and this is probably one of the best, if not the best, cooler for small ITX motherboards on the market. You can see it's only 37mm total height, which really is a very good low profile cooler. And if you're after a cooler which doesn't have a very high profile, then this is probably one of the best on the market. It's about £40 ish to buy, which isn't cheap, but with Noctua you get what you pay for and you get a really good build quality. Now I think AMD have released this one at the right time, because this build here is so small that I'm needing a small heatsink here. So let's remove this little spreader here where we can put our M.2 SSD under there. It's an NVMe drive, but just going to remove this little pad here. This pad is to keep the drive cool, and you just remove that plastic bit when you're ready. So I'm just going to get the drive and insert it in, and so we can put the cover back on. Now these drives, you can pick these up. I'm going to go with this ADATA one here, and you can see there's a little notch on both ends here. This little notch is what slides into the board. Now there's many different types of these. They're B&M, B, and loads of different types. Okay, so make sure you get the right one for your board. So slot that in and you should be okay, and then screw her down, and then we can put Windows on a little bit later on. And I do like it because it's hidden underneath that heat spreader there. Some of them are pinned to the back of the board, so just do your research and have a look at the board that you want, because some of these are on the bottom of the board and it makes access a little bit more difficult once the board is in. And if you've got a small form factor build like this, then obviously that's going to be a bit more difficult. Don't forget to remove that plastic cover, and this will keep your drive cool. And all we need to do here is screw this down. Now it's ideal to use a magnetic screwdriver here, because these screws are so tiny. So I'm just going to line that hole up there and get my screwdriver. Now my screwdriver has lost its magnetism, so I need to get another one or magnetize it again. I'm just going to drop it in here by holding my finger on it, and it can be a bit fiddly, so just be patient there. So just going to tighten that up, and you can see here the magnetic tip on this is gone, so I need to drop a big powerful magnet on there for a bit to magnetize it again. So we've got that done, and don't forget to remove this part, because obviously it's going to get hot and it won't cool down. Okay, so now we're going to put our CPU in and put our cooler on, but first I'm just going to remove these CPU cooler brackets here. So I'm just going to remove them. Now these are made of plastic, they've got 4 screws. Now remember, keep this safe guys, because keep this in your motherboard box, because if you have to RMA the board at any time, they're going to want to have those back on the board, because you'll end up with just 4 big holes and you won't be able to mount anything. There's a back plate on there, and I've seen people on eBay selling second-hand boards, and what they've done is they've removed these and used their own coolers and forgot to keep these safe, and now you've lost your back plate and your bracket system. And you can get them on sites second-hand or brand new, but it's just really advisable to keep these safe. So what we're going to do here is going to put this to one side. We've got one of these as well in our kit, so you can see 4 big holes here now, but don't worry, because we do have our own backplate and new screws with our new cooler, so I'll show you that in a bit. So all we need to do is put those back in the box, and we'll move on and put our CPU in and get our cooler. Now as I said, this is Noctua's new version. Now if you have the older version, I've heard rumours that you can actually contact them and they will send you an AM4 bracket if you are now going over to AMD, and I'm not sure how true that is or whether it's possible, but that's what some article I read. Now look at the presentation of this bit of kit here. It's so professional. You've got a really nice fan on here, very good quality, good build quality. It's got some weight to it for the size. You've got your 4 screws, an extra cable, your Go Faster badge, and also your compound here. Now you can see here it's very low profile, and I'm telling you now, if you are building an ITX build, you definitely want to get this cooler. It's going to make life a lot easier. Now you may see that the fan doesn't go all the way over to the edge, and I think that's just because it will make the fan a different shape, and I think they just wanted to keep it nice and square. That's just my opinion. But what we're going to do is get the CPU in first. So let me just get this CPU out of the box. Now this is an AMD Ryzen 5. This is just a 2400G, and if you want to put a 2700X or any of those, you can do, and that's your choice. And I'll probably go with a better chip at a later date. You can see the little triangle here, and you can see the pins on here, so be very careful. Intel boards have the pins on the board, AMD have the pins on the chip. So what I'm going to do here is pull the retention lever back up here so we can insert our CPU. Now there should be a little triangle here on there. Now on the board it's just blacked out, but there is a mark that tells you it's on the corner here. You can check your user manual and it will tell you if you've never built a computer before, but they generally tell you on the board as well. Now you don't have to force this in, you just drop it in. Try not to touch the top of the chip or the pins here because you'll damage them, and the top of the chip won't harm it if you touch it, but you do have oily residue on your fingers and it could stop the compound from spreading evenly. Now just give it a little wiggle and don't push down on it, and pull that retention lever back down. They are really easy to put in Ryzen AM4 chips. So what we're going to do now is put our back plate on again. Now it does come with one in the kit, so I'm using their one and keeping the one that comes with a board in the box. So it comes with 4 screws, you just push them in the hole, and then I'm just going to push those through the bottom of the board and screw it down, and it's that simple really. It's a bit fiddly, so I'm just going to rest it onto the table here and then drop the motherboard on top of it. That's the way that worked okay for me, and you can do it whatever way you like, as long as you get the thing screwed on, that's all that matters. So don't forget we need to put the compound on here, and make sure there's no sticker on here. That's a schoolboy error, make sure you remove that. The compound won't be able to cool the chip if you don't remove that plastic, and you'll end up damaging your hardware. So we've got our 4 mounting holes on our bracket. This can only sit one of 2 ways. Okay, you can't have it this way because the holes will not be situated in the right place. So make sure you've got your cable up where the CPU fan header is, so you can put that in nice and tidy so you don't end up going across the fan. Now before you do that, make sure you put your compound on and remove that sticker, as I've said. Now Noctua have included their awesome compound here, which is nice of them. I'm not sure how much is in here, but there's probably enough for a couple of applications. So I'm just going to put a fair amount on there because of that's probably a bit too much, but that'll be okay. There's quite a big heat spread on there, so it should be okay. But probably a little bit less than that. People go a little bit anal about how much you should put on. As long as you've got enough to cover that heat spreader, you should be fine. So you can either spread it out or you can just squish it down. It's entirely up to you. I'm just going to squish this one down with it the way it is, and line those up on the screw holes here. I've got the tripod in the way, so I'm just going to come at it from the side so I can see, line it up and then push those down. Now I need to hold the bottom and rotate this over so I can screw it. So you do it which way you want to do it and which way you find it easier. So I'm just going to put the screw back in and screw this now down. There we go. And you can see how small that board is. It's a tiny little board. So let me just tighten these up. Now I'm just going to tighten these up diagonally. I'm not going to go all the way home with these, just going to look there. You can see the screw going in, so don't want to tighten these right down because it might sort of put it out of sync here. So I'm just going to go round and just screw these up a little bit at a time. Eventually you'll get a bit of resistance there and then just stop. So once I've got these down, and this is probably one of the most easiest mechanisms for putting on a heatsink that I've known. It's a really easy way of putting on a heatsink. Now some of these can be very tricky, but this one's very easy. So kudos for Noctua for making it so simple. and you can see how low profile that CPU cooler is. It's so low, and I needed that because obviously the power supply is going to be above that, so I needed a bit of freedom there for the airflow to move, as you'll see a little bit later on in the video. So I'm just going to give these a little tighten off. That one just needed a bit more, as you can see here. So just keep going round until they stop, basically. That's it, and we're done. So I'm going to flip this back, and doesn't that look awesome? That looks absolutely awesome. Now obviously the colour scheme for Noctuas are not for everyone. They are brown, and that's always the way, but that's the way they do their coolers and fans. If you don't like them, then don't buy them. It's as simple as that, and buy the ones you like. But I like them. I think they're very good. So you can see how compact this is now, and we also have our RAM here, which we're going to be putting on. Now if you had a fan on there and also a bigger cooler, it may cause problems with your RAM, especially with these ITX boards here. We're going for the Vengeance RGB RAM here. So if you're going with something like this, you always need to plan out your build because of the case you're using. It may be a very small case. In this case, this is a tiny case, and there's going to be not a lot of room for the CPU fan. I think it's got to be a total height for me 58, I think, which is not a lot. So you're very limited to what you can actually use, and this one and the one I had before was the only two that I found that actually fitted. I think the C7 fits as well, which was slightly bigger. This is only 37 millimeters high, which is very low. Now sometimes these little lugs on the side here to put your RAM in, some of them don't open, okay, so don't force them because you could snap them off the board. They're very brittle, so only one side opens here. Just line up the little notch and basically slot that into position. You'll hear a little click, and that will be that. It's not that difficult, honestly. Just push it down and you'll hear a little click, and that's it. So let's just offer up the next bit of RAM. And this is 3200 megahertz RAM here, so this should be a pretty fast little system. Now we know AMD loves to have fast RAM, so 3200 should be good enough here. Just going to put the fan header here into the board. There's a little spot right up the back here where the 8-pin CPU plug is. So I'm just going to plug it next to that, and that should be okay. I'll tidy the cables up a little bit later on. Now obviously you can upgrade that chip at a later date. I would have liked to put a different chip in here, but that's the chip I had to hand at the time, so I'll upgrade that at a later date here. As you can see, everything is looking pretty snazzy. It's getting done, and what we're going to do is move on to the next step. Now you can see how low that cooler is there, and that's the reason why I went for it, because if you see the case, which you're going to see in a bit when I drop it in, there's not much room here for airflow, and this is ideal. You can see it's lower than the actual RAM here, and if you had anything bigger than this inside here, you're going to cause yourself a lot of problems. So always do your measurements and always check the specifications of the case to make sure that you get the right case and the right CPU cooler and all the right components for your build. Otherwise you're going to run into issues. Now the CPU cooler I had before this one didn't support AM4 CPUs on sockets, so that's the reason why I had to change it. There's a bit of a misleading information on the website, so I just swapped it out and sent it back, and basically got one that does support that processor. Now the case we're going for is the SilverStone Sugo series SG13. Now I've heard rumours that they are going to bring out the SG14, but I don't know when. I think this has been discontinued now, but it's an awesome little case if you're looking for a really small form factor, and this is basically what you're going to get when you purchase it. I think it's around about £39 or something like that, which is really affordable and really cheap. There's a couple of little indentations on here. I'm not sure what these are for. need to do my research here. They're probably for some sort of fans or something like that that you can attach there. I'm not too sure. I need to read up what that is. Got an indentation there for, but yeah, because there's not a lot of fans inside here, so you just got to bear that in mind. It's a very small case. There's only one fan area, which will be at the front there, so that's going to be a 120mm intake fan, and you can see how much room you got here. Now this case will take a full-size power supply, ATX power supply, but you will need a bracket for that. And also if you are going to do that, then it's not going to leave you a lot of space inside, and you also will have to change your cooler. That cooler will still fit with a larger power supply, but just bear that in mind when you're looking to build your system, that the sort of restrictions and movement you're going to get inside. Once we get the cables and everything inside here, this is where you're going to get the airflow in the front here, which is going to be where it's going to draw cool air in from outside into the front. And then obviously what we're going to do is have the power supply drawing air from inside the case and blowing it out the back, and that's basically what we've got with this little tiny case. I'm not sure what the airflow will be like and what the temperatures will be like. We'll have to wait and see. Got your power button here and your activity light here. You've got two USB 3.0 ports on the front, headphone and audio jack on the front here as well. Now obviously with a case this small, you're going to be limited to storage space as well because it's so small, but there is an area here for your drive bay where you can put in, say, a solid state drive in there as well. So there is room for area where you can put drives in, but not vast amounts. And also you can see there's a bit of ventilation here, but you're always going to get restrictions in these little small form factor cases here. This is the ventilation for your graphics card. You've got some ventilation on the side here, and you need to check your length of a graphics card that you're going to be using if you're using a case of this size, because obviously you're going to be limited as well. So let's get the top off of the case here, and then we can start to put the components in. So that's what we need to do next, and then we can continue with the build. Now hopefully the graphics card that I've chosen will fit into this build. I've did some measurements and hopefully it's going to be tight, but hopefully it will fit. So let's just pull the top off here. Now again, I suppose people are asking themselves why you'd need something so small. And again, you could use this as a streaming PC. You could use this as a LAN gaming PC if you can get a decent enough graphics card. I think a 1070 Ti is good enough. Got your screws and stuff inside here, so that will come in handy a little bit later on. The only concerns for me here is airflow really, and also trying to keep it cool inside, and hopefully it's not going to get too hot. And I've seen raving reviews about this case saying it's an awesome little case, so the proof's in the pudding. Now we can remove that top brace there if we want to a little bit later on to get into some access areas there to do the cabling to make it easier. And I'm going to remove these screws on the side. Now if you are pulling these front panels off on the front of the case, just be careful because some of them are screwed from the inside and they have an invisible screw, and you go yanking away and you'll shear that right off. So just be careful. Some are screwed in, some aren't. So again, it's just sort of trial and error, because obviously unless you work with the same case all the time, they're the sort of things you need to look out for. Otherwise you're going to have to get your hot glue gun out. So here we have the fan we're going to be using. It's a 120mm fan, performance edition. We're going to stick that on here, and hopefully this will be giving us good airflow and draw that into the case and try to keep the components as cool as possible. So this will only accept 120mm. Now you could put a water cooled system in here. I mean, there's going to be some limitations. I've got some color rings here, Now if you are going to go down the water cooling route, you would need to work out what cooler you're going to get. Probably 120mm rad is going to be the maximum you're getting here, and then you'd have to decide whether you want airflow or a CPU cooler. So something like this will just draw air in and keep the case nice and cool inside, whereas the water cooled system was going to be really for the CPU, and it's going to be all about what you choose to go with. I'll probably give it a go with the fan at the front here and see the temperatures, and then may drop in 120mm rad to see what it's like with one of those in there as well, and see what performs the best at a later date. If you want to see that video, let me know in the comment section. I can always drop that in there and give that a test. It'd be interesting to see. So I went with airflow over CPU cooling, so I think that cooler is going to be good enough for the CPU. As you can see here, we're pretty much okay at the front here, so I'm just going to put the front panel back on. I've pushed all the cables back through. Now you can remove that top brace up there if you find it a little bit difficult, and I should have probably removed it right at the beginning here. Now building this build is not going to be the same as a normal mid-tower build. You can see the mounting part for the solid state drive, and I'm probably going to drop that in now because I think it's going to be more easier to do it now than it would do doing it later on. So you may have to chop and change the way you build the computer because of the size of it, and depending on the difficulty as well. And you have to plan out your cable management here because there is not a lot of room, so that's what you got to think of really, is airflow, because the more cables the more restriction of airflow, and we just need to set that all out. So I'm probably going to mount this inside here, and that will probably be good enough. And I think you can get a 3.5-inch drive in here. I'm not too sure. I'm sure I read somewhere where you can put a 3.5-inch drive in here, but I've not seen a place where to put it, so we'll check that out. I'll have to do some research on that to see, but that will just create more heat, I think, to be honest. So let's get the IO shield in, and we'll get this in. Just push this in. Sometimes these can go in easy and sometimes they need a bit more force, so just give it a little push and push that in. There we go, and that's in. And what I'm going to do next is get the board in here. Now it already has its mounting positions for the board. Now all these ITX boards have only 4 screws on them, so there's only 4 mounting screws. You can see how tight that is. It's so small, especially this case, and try and get this in line. And sometimes you have to give it a bit more force to push it back to line the screw holes up, as I'm doing in this case here. They're not sitting up the way I want them to, so, and you can see the case is actually filling up now. It's starting to be less and less room to move. So let's go ahead and get this board screwed down, and then we can move on to the next step. And I'll put the cables in for the solid state drive near the end. So let's go ahead and screw these up. So now we've got the final screw to go in the corner here. And now you can see that top plate there. I think when you are going to put the USB 3.0 cable and all the other cables, it might be nice and easy to remove that top plate. You can see here, and that's what I did in the end because it made it a lot easier for me. I did a couple of them without it, and then I took it off because my hands were too big. So let's go ahead and get these on now. Sadly, you're not going to see too much about me putting these on because there's not much room inside, and when I put my hand in there it just blurts out the whole area so you can't see it. So I need to put the front fan plug into the board as well, and that is the only fan header on the board. So there is an RGB one on there, so I'm just going to plug this in and get this done. I'll tidy these cables up a little bit later on. Just needs to slide. There's a little tiny ridge down the back which slides on. Now this is a 3-pin going into a 4-pin on the board, but that should be okay. And I've moved that out the way, and what I need to do now is just put the other cables in. Now sadly you're probably not going to see too much there, so what I'm going to do is try and do my best to get a bit of it on here, because obviously you're not going to be able to see it. And this is the USB 3.0. It's getting a bit dark here, so I'm just going to put a torch on so I can see where the holes are. Now be careful not to bend these pins. It's so easy to bend those pins when you've not got them lined up properly. It doesn't sit all the way down, that's just normal. So I'm just going to remove this top plate here so I can get to the front panel cables here, so it makes it a little bit easier for me to put those in. So I have thought about it. SilverStone makes some really good cases where you can get some really ease of access. They've really thought about everything with this case being so small here. Now you can see here I've got the cables, they're all labelled, and all I need to do is plug these into the board. Now if you've never built a PC before, it can look a bit daunting, but it's really easy nowadays. Just go to the user manual, what you get with your motherboard, or you can look online and you'll be able to plug these in. Now when you've done a few of these, you won't need to worry about reading the manual because you'll get used to it. This is just the audio cable, and again I don't know why they don't go all the way down to the end with that black cable in there. They always leave those colour cables and they look absolutely awful. So now we've got all the cables in, just going to pull the power supply out and go with the power supply here. Now you can already see the amount of cables here. If I started using all of these cables, it's going to really fill up that case, and there's not going to be much room for airflow. So I'm going to try to keep this down to a minimum. This is the plate that comes with the power supply, and this is so I can mount it to the case because it's a small form factor power supply. Now it just goes to show you how technology moves forward. This is a 600 watt platinum rated power supply, and look how small that is. I think it's a Great Wall that makes these power supplies, and you can see how small. That's 600 watts of power in there with 50 amps on the 12 volt rail, which is absolutely awesome for a little small form factor power supply. So if you are building small form factor machines, ITX machines, then get yourself the right power supply. It's over £100, but it's well worth it because it's going to deliver good power, and also it will last a long time, and the build quality is exceptionally good for this particular power supply. Also it's fully modular, which means it's going to cut down on the cables inside here, so we don't have to use all of the cables, which means it will keep it nice and tidy. Now look at the size of this HX750i. It fits the whole size of this case. I mean, look at the size of that. I mean, that's a bit bigger than a standard ATX type power supply, but it just goes to show you how small that case is, and why you don't want to use a bigger power supply here. It's worth spending the money to get the smaller power supply, so you don't fill it up too much and get some good airflow here. So let me just get this inside. Now this fits on the inside, and then you need to screw it from the outside here. Now sadly they don't give you an extra 4 screws to screw this in, but you do get the case screws, which does allow you to do that. So the power supply only gives you 4, but you do get the case screws to use, so I'll just use those. Now whether you want the fan facing up or whether you want the fan facing down is another choice thing that you're going to have to take, because if it's facing down, then obviously the fan for the CPU is going to be there. So I'm going to have it facing down, and I'll test it both ways to see which way is best for this little build. So I'm facing it down at the moment. There's no filter at the top, but there is airflow through that top ventilation on the case, so I could flip it round the other way if I wanted to. So what I'm going to do here is just put in the CPU cable for the board, and I'm going to run this round to the side. I'll do the cable management near the end, and it's never going to be the most prettiest of builds because of the size and the restrictions that you're going to get. So bear that in mind when you're building a case of this nature. You're not going to get a beautiful looking case. It's going to be super difficult to get that looking really sweet inside with the amount of restrictions you're going to have to face. So I've got all the cables in now, the 24 pin, got all the cables in. You can already see it's starting to look pretty messy. I'll tidy this up a little bit, or as best as I can, a little bit later on. I'm just going to unplug this and route that around the bottom so it doesn't look so messy. And this is for the power for the solid state drive, and I'm going to run some power to that as well. And I need to put the SATA cable in there as well. So let's go ahead and I'll get that sorted out, and then we can tidy these cables up as best we can to try and keep airflow in the case. So I'm going to get a couple of these cable ties here and run these around. Now the objective here for me is to try and bunch it up as much as possible, so we've got a bit of airflow movement inside the case to keep things cool. And that's what my main goal here is. So I'll put these in. You're not going to see too much because my hands are going to be in the way, so I'm not going to show you the whole process here because obviously you won't see too much. But you get these little cable ties in with the power supply here. There's quite a few of them, and probably that's going to be okay. So I'm just going to put this cable in. This is for, you can see what the cable management looks like. Doesn't look too bad, to be honest with you, and we have got a bit of free airflow there from the CPU cooler. I'm just going to put in the cable for the graphics card here to give the graphics card power. Now remember, we're putting a 1070 Ti in here. Now I've gone for a blower type card here because obviously I want it to blow air outside of the case. It's going to blow air out the back. So let's get that card into the case, and this is the card here. Now hopefully this is going to fit inside of this case. You can see it's going to be right to the very end. It should fit right down here. We're going to have to take that front off again to get the card in because it's definitely not going to fit through the top. So I'll just need to remove these screws here for the back, and this releases up the expansion slots, so I can remove those little covers there that are on the expansion slots. So I just need to remove those. Now another thing to take into account is the power delivery for all your hardware that you've put into your small form factor build. And obviously you can see we've got an SF600 here, which is a 600 watt platinum power supply, and that should be plenty of power to drive the hardware that we're putting in here. And it's important that you get good power here. You can see the size of the card is really massive, and I'm going to have to come in through the front to get this in, and it should fit, I'm hoping. So it's a bit of a tight squeeze. And again, it's really important to get a really good power supply. You don't want to buy a cheap power supply that's going to let go and end up taking all your hardware with it. So you can see how tight that is in here. It's just sticking out on the end there. I'm hoping the front case will close. You can see it's just poking out the front here. It should be alright. And there's a bit of ventilation around the front there, so that should draw air in as well. So again, yeah, just plan out your build. Make sure you get the right sizes and the right length of card, and also the right power to deliver all your hardware, and you should be okay. You know, that power supply is about 100 odd pounds, which is quite a lot of money for a small form factor power supply, but you can't cheap out on things like that. You can't go and buy a cheap power supply, and if you put a full-size ATX power supply in there, you would have seen how much difficulty you'd have had to keep the system cool because it had been too cramped. So really sort of plan out your build when it comes to something this small. And all in all, I think SilverStone has done an awesome job with this case. It's worked out really well, and you think this will play any modern game, this 1070 Ti. It will play all the modern day games with no problems whatsoever. I'm just screwing down this back area here to lock in the graphics card, and then we can put the top of the case back on, and you'll be able to fire her up. Now, if you want to see benchmarking and stuff like that, and some temps and things like that, let me know in the comments section below, and I'll make another video about that, because obviously this video is starting to get on a bit. It's 40 odd minutes, so I've tried to cut some bits out, but I wanted to make a full how-to on this one because it's a small ITX, and some people may be interested in that. So all I need to do now is tidy this cable up for the graphics card here, so I'm just going to get a couple of cable ties and tie that down, and we should be pretty much in good shape. So as you can see, doesn't look too bad at all. So let's have a little quick look at what it's going to look like once all the cables are tied down. Now obviously you can be doing yours slightly different and spend a bit more time with the cable management, but just bearing in mind you're never going to get this looking really awesome. It's just really tight in there, and it's not gonna, there's nowhere you can put the cables, so there's only one place to put them, and you're going to have to clump them in an area and tie them up with some cable ties, and that's about as good as you're going to get for a build of this size. The main objective here is to not restrict any sort of airflow really, and that's what I've tried to do here. Try to keep the fan nice and clear so it can blow cold air into the case, and you can see here that's probably about as best you're going to get it. Probably a few more cable ties in there at a later date if I wanted to, but it's not too bad considering the amount of space that you've got, and there is still a bit of airflow in there for air to move around and to be drawn in from the CPU cooler and stuff like that. So all in all, not too bad, and I will probably put a couple of extra cable ties here and there. I don't think it's too bad really. It looks okay for what it is. We've still got some air movement for the power supply. Now obviously that power supply is going to draw warm air in once it gets hot and blow it out the back, and that's another extractor. So we've got air going in the front and using the power supply as a bit of an extractor and pulling it back out the back, and hopefully that should be good enough to keep this system cool. And we can do some testing at a later date. If you want to see that, let me know in the comment section, and I'll run some benchmarks and do some burning tests to see what temps we get. Now remember, we are running an AMD system here, and we've got a bit of room where the CPU and the power supply cooler is there. But I think all in all, I'm pretty impressed with it. It looks okay. It's good enough for what I wanted. I shall put the front top brace on here now, and then we can put the top back onto this, and I'll show you the end results. I'm just going to screw this down here and finish this build off. Also, while I'm screwing this down, let me know in the comment section below what you want to see, what sort of videos you want to see, whether you like this type of video or whether you want to see more how-to videos, or what type of content you want to see in 2019, and I can do my best to make those videos for you. And obviously remember guys, I make these videos for you, so it's you guys that are watching them that I want to make content that you enjoy watching as well. So all your requests down in the comment section, let me know what you'd like to see, and I'll try and do my best to make those videos for you. Now obviously I try to make a wide range of different videos to keep people interested for different things like builds and stuff. Obviously builds cost a lot of money, and you can't just do these week in, week out, because obviously the expense that it does cost. Now it's different if you've got sponsorships and people are sending you stuff for free, but obviously you can't be doing these weekly, so don't be saying I would like to see a build a week, because that's just not going to happen. You know, these will happen when and where I get you know, the funds to do builds. And obviously I don't have a need for this system as of yet, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. But other than that, I'll think of something. If not, I'll just sell it on eBay or something like that. So what we'll do is I'll get the top cover on here now, and I'll show you what the end result looks like. Now the video went on a little bit longer than I wanted to. I wanted to try and keep it down to around about 25 minutes or something like that, but obviously me explaining some bits about the parts I chose obviously lengthened the video, and I didn't want to cut it out. I did some free talking on there, and I was waffling on for so long, and the video turned out to be far too long, so I did a voiceover in the end and cut all that stuff out, because it would have been too long and you guys would have probably abandoned the video because it was far too long. So what I'm going to do is find out what those two indentations are. I'm pretty sure that might be some sort of indentations for fans or something like that. I don't know. I need to look and at the manual and see whether there is some fans that you can get there. There will be small fans, I would have thought, and if that is the case, then probably that's where you're going to have some extractor fans on there or something like that to extraction of heat. I'll check the user manual and we can take a look, but I probably won't put no fans there if I don't need it, because I don't want it sounding like an airport, especially a little small system like this. Anyway, let me just put this final screw in here and I'll show you the end result, what it looks like with some lighting around it so it doesn't look so cheesy. But you can see here, that's basically what it looks like. I need to put the RGB software on here and change the RGB lighting inside, but you can see it looks pretty nice. You've got the little lighting at the bottom. I can make that all the same color if I want to, but I haven't got the software on there. But other than that, I think it turned out pretty sweet and it's a pretty good rig. If you want to see some specs and some benchmarks in the next video or a video at a later date, let me know in the comment section and I'll do my best to make those videos for you. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a great weekend, guys. My name is Brian from briteccomputers.co.uk. Thanks again for watching and thanks for your continued support. I shall see you again for another video real soon, and take it easy. Bye for now. Now, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit the big red subscribe button on my YouTube channel and hit the bell notification button next to that to be notified when we upload new videos.